of Ussel has never been out of the left's hands. And then there's the traveling. The roads are appalling. You'll wear yourself out, and when I need you, you will be no use for anything. Given all that, he insisted, better to run in Paris. In the end, however, and not without difficulty, I won the battle. So that was how I was unwittingly born, if I can put it like that, into political life, at the heart of Upper Corrèze, on the plateau of Mille Sources, where human warmth makes up for the harshness of the climate. I was quickly fired up by the challenge. Much more than a question of parties or ideologies, politics was from the first a question of people, personalities, and sensitivities for me. Instinctively and temperamentally drawn to other people, it was in this domain that I naturally found my true voice. Although the product of a family that fiercely defended secularism and authentically radical values, my 4 grandparents were all school teachers, I did not receive what might be called a political education from my father or mother. Neither of them had ever demonstrated any beliefs liable to influence me, and even less to prepare me to become one day the Member of Parliament for Corrèze. Were they rather more inclined to the left than to the right, or vice versa? I never succeeded in finding out. Both of them, genuinely generous people, taught me the importance of sharing and of service to others, particularly the most deprived. The only member of my family to have gone into politics was my paternal grandfather, Louis Chirac. I was barely 5 when he died in May 1937, but I still remember him quite clearly. He was an imposing character, in stature as well as character, being well over 6 feet tall. With his magnificent head of hair and his majestic voice, he terrified me as a child with an authority that none of his nearest and dearest dared challenge. In his presence, everyone knuckled under. He had only to enter a room, and I would immediately flee or hide myself under a table. A teacher as much appreciated by his students as by his superiors, Louis Chirac ended his career as a principal of a school that is still called the Chirac School, so anchored was my grandfather in people's memories. I knew several of his previous pupils, whom he used to hit on the fingers with his ruler. Well known as a Freemason, Louis Chirac became the venerable host of the local lodge. He was fervently anti-clerical. An active member of the Radical Socialist Party of Brive, Louis Chirac was involved in all the political battles between the 2 wars. In 1936, already president of the Popular University, vice president of the Association of Secular Schools, and secretary of the local section of Pupils of the Nation, he took part in the convention of the French Union for Female Suffrage. A photograph that appeared in the newspapers shows Louis Chirac in the middle of a group of feminists under a banner proclaiming, "French women want the vote." I was happy and proud of the role my grandfather played in the anti-fascist rallies held in Brive during the summer of 1936 to support Spanish Republicans in the terrible civil war that pitted them against Franco's troops. Although not as politically involved, my maternal grandfather, Jean Valette, who had been educated by the Jesuits, had, along with his wife, the same Republican streak as well as the same principles of a rigorous, secular, and progressive radicalism. This humanistic spirit, which each of my ancestors had defended and enshrined in his or her own way, was an integral part of a family heritage with which I had always identified. It was not by chance that I became a fierce defender of secularism, convinced that a society should give its members the greatest freedom of conscience and conviction, and that it was unacceptable to impose religious direction on anyone, although this commitment to secular society has never prevented me from being a believer or having a deep interest in spiritual matters and the history of all religions. My mother, a devout